Some stories are better heard with someone else. But you're here alone. Welcome to Don't Listen Alone. This is 100% ad-free, just you and whatever comes next. Drop your location and the time before we begin. Now, listen carefully. Not everything you hear is part of the story. When I think back to that time in my life, I always see it like a small picture inside my head, a quiet old town in Cameron's Norte where the streets were still simple and the nights did not feel dangerous. At least not in the way big cities feel dangerous now. I was 7 years old then, almost turning 8, still small, still innocent, and the biggest change in our family was that my mother was pregnant with my only brother. It was an exciting thing for everyone. People in town would always ask my mother how far along she was and whether the baby was moving already. Neighbors would smile at her belly and make jokes about how my father must be proud to finally have a son. Inside our house, whenever the adults talked about the baby, I would listen quietly. I liked the idea of having a brother, someone younger than me, someone I could maybe protect and tease at the same time. Life in that small town moved slowly. We had the same streets, the same sorry stores, the same faces that you could recognize even from afar. People knew each other, and even if they did not know your name, they probably knew whose child you were or which house you came from. In a place like that, there was a feeling that nothing truly terrible could happen in the open, because someone would always see, someone would always recognize you and help you. Maybe that is one of the reasons my mother felt safe enough to start her strange little habit when she was pregnant. During that particular pregnancy, she developed this odd routine of walking around at night. It was not just a one-time thing. She did it often. After dinner, when some families were already turning off their lights or sitting in front of their televisions, my mother would suddenly say she wanted to walk. She said the fresh air felt good, that walking helped her relax and made her feel better. Looking back now, I think it might have been a way for her to handle the weight of being pregnant again, to clear her thoughts and calm herself. At that time, as a child, I did not care much about her reasons. I only knew that whenever she walked at night, she always dragged me along with her, and I did not mind at all. For me, those walks were like mini adventures. The air at night was cooler than during the day, and the town felt somehow softer and more mysterious. Sometimes the streetlights flickered, and shadows stretched across the road. And there was one more important thing. Those walks almost always included a stop at a little restaurant we liked. That restaurant was modest, not fancy at all, with simple tables and chairs and a bright light over the counter. But to my young mind, it was like a treasure spot because of what they served. They had tapsilog and French fries, and I absolutely loved both. The smell of garlic rice, fried egg, and tapa mixed with the salty scent of the fries felt like heaven to me. So whenever my mother would say we were going out for a walk, I already knew that somewhere in that walk, there would probably be tapsilog and fries waiting for us. And that thought alone made me happy to go, even if sometimes my legs felt a little tired after a long day. On one particular night, everything started out just like any other walk. The air was cool, and there was a gentle breeze. The sky was clear, and the moon was shining bright, casting soft light over the town. It was one of those nights when the moon looks so big that it almost seems like it is watching everything. My mother and I walked side by side along the street. I can still remember the sound of our slippers hitting the concrete, the soft murmur of other people talking in the distance, the occasional passing tricycle rattling by, and a faint smell of dust, leaves, and distant cooking. We were only a few stores away from the small restaurant where we always ate. I could already imagine the plate of tapsilog in front of me and the paper container of fries on the side, hot and crispy. I was not thinking of anything else, just food and the nice feeling of being outside with my mother. But then something happened that changed the way I remember that night forever. As we passed those last few stores before the restaurant, my eyes wandered, as children's eyes often do. I was not just looking forward. I was looking around, taking in everything without really trying. Across from the restaurant, a little to the left, there was the town's public clinic. It was a simple building used for checkups and basic treatments. People went there for minor illnesses or vaccinations. The clinic was surrounded by big trees, the kind that had been there for many years, their branches thick and wide, their leaves forming a kind of roof above the ground. In the daytime, those trees simply looked like shade. At night, they turned the area around the clinic darker than the rest of the street. The streetlights did not fully reach them, and the shadows gathered under the branches, making the ground what people call malinamlam, dim and unclear. But on that night, because the moon was especially bright, there was enough light to outline the shapes of the trees and the clinic yard. The mix of darkness from the trees and the brightness from the moon created a strange contrast, like a scene from a dream where some parts are too clear and other parts are too hidden. My eyes were drawn to one particular tree in the clinic yard. It was tall, taller than the others, so much so that when I looked up at it, the top seemed close to the sky. The moon was right there beside the top of that tree, and from where I stood, it looked as if the moon was hanging next to the highest branches like a giant lamp. The way I remember it, the moon looked small compared to the tree's height, almost like a basketball floating next to something much bigger. That was when I saw it. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. There, near the tip of the tree, just where the branches met the night sky and the moonlight, I saw the shape of a figure. My young mind tried to make sense of it. It looked like a man, or at least it had the outline of one. I could see what seemed like a head, arms, torso, and legs. It was perched there at the top of the tree in a way that did not seem natural, almost as if it was sitting or standing on a branch that should not be strong enough to hold its weight. I stared at it, my steps slowing down without me realizing it. The more I looked, the more details I began to see, and the more I understood that whatever it was not just a regular man standing in a tree. The creature looked naked, though from where I was, I could not see clear details of clothes or fabric. Its skin looked almost gray in the moonlight, a pale, unnatural shade that did not match the normal color of a person's skin. It was not just the grayness that bothered me, though. There was something else, something that made my stomach twist slowly with unease. On its head I thought I saw a horn, something protruding where only hair or a hat should be. And behind it, I saw the outline of a tail, long and thin, something no human should have. It was not moving fast or waving wildly. It was just there, part of the shape, but enough to make my heart begin to beat faster. In that moment, I knew two things clearly, even as a child. First, what I was seeing was not a normal man. No matter how much I tried to adjust my eyes or tell myself it might be a prank or someone climbing a tree, the shape was wrong. The horn and the tail alone told me that. Second, I was not the only one seeing it. The people around us, the other individuals walking near my mother and me, had also noticed. I heard voices, low at first, then a little louder as more people pointed. Some of them said, "Ano yun?" which means, "What's that?" Their confusion and unease matched what I was feeling inside. It was not just my imagination. There was something up there in that tree that did not belong to the ordinary world. I do not remember if my mother looked up or if she kept walking. I do not remember if I said anything to her at that exact moment because everything inside my head went quiet except for my own fear and curiosity. All I really remember clearly is that I saw that creature on top of the tree, with its gray skin, horn, and tail, framed by the bright round moon beside it, and that other people saw it too and reacted with confusion and astonishment. After that, the memory of the rest of the night is blurry. I am sure we still went to the restaurant. I am sure I still ate my tapsilog and fries because my mother would have wanted to keep things normal for me. But even if I did, it did not feel the same. The image of that creature stayed in my mind, sitting at the very top of everything that happened. What might seem strange to others is that I did not tell anyone my full story about that night for a very long time. I kept my mouth shut about what I saw for years. I did not share it with my friends, I did not talk about it during casual conversations, and I did not even try to ask my mother in detail whether she had seen it too or what she thought it was. Part of me does not fully understand why I stayed quiet, but I know some of the reasons. One big reason was fear of not being believed. I was still so young, and children are often told that their imaginations are too active, that they see monsters where there are none and make mountains out of small things. I was scared that if I told people, they would laugh at me or say I was just imagining things or dreaming. Another reason was that talking about it would make it more real. As long as the memory stayed in my head, like a secret picture that only I could see, I could still pretend that maybe it was something I had misunderstood, that maybe my eyes had played a trick on me. But if I said it out loud, in full detail, then I would have to accept that what I saw really happened, and that thought frightened me more than silence did. So I kept it inside. I went on with my life. We moved, time passed, I grew older, and if you had seen me then, you would have thought I had forgotten that night completely because I did not talk about it. But the image of that creature never completely left me. It was like an old photograph hidden at the bottom of a drawer in my mind. I did not look at it every day, but I knew it was there. Sometimes, late at night, or when I was alone and the world was quiet, the memory would come back and I would see that tree again, the bright moon, and the creature's gray body with its horn and tail. I would feel the same small shiver run down my spine, the same tightness in my chest that I felt when I was a child staring up at it. When I turned 14, something inside me changed. Maybe it was because I was a teenager already and wanted to understand myself better. Maybe it was because I was tired of carrying the memory alone. Or maybe I simply felt stronger and less afraid of being called crazy. Whatever the reason, at 14, I finally decided to share what I had seen. The first person I chose to tell was my mother. It felt right to start with her because she had been there that night, walking beside me. She had been the one who loved those walks, and who was pregnant with my brother at the time. I thought maybe she had seen the creature too and had just been quiet like I was. Or maybe she would finally tell me something about that place, that tree, or about what other people had said after that night. So, one day, I gathered my courage and told her everything. I described the walk, the clinic, the tree, the bright moon, the gray figure, the horn, the tail, and the voices of people around us asking, "Ano yun?" I told her that I had been seeing it in my mind for years. When I finished, I watched her face, waiting for every reaction. I expected her to either clearly say she believed me or clearly say she did not. But her reaction was more quiet and complicated. My mother did not immediately say that she did not believe me. She did not call me crazy or tell me to stop imagining things. But she also did not offer a direct explanation for what I saw. She did not say, "Yes, I saw it too." And she did not say, "No, that was just your dream." She listened, she was calm, and then she changed the topic. It was like she allowed me to speak but did not want to go deeper into the subject. That reaction left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was a little relieved that she did not laugh at me or scold me. On the other hand, I had hoped she would give me a clear answer, and she did not. Her silence on the matter made the whole thing even more mysterious in my mind. As the years went by and I grew even older, almost 20, my feelings about that night changed again. The fear remained, but curiosity began to grow stronger. Instead of just being scared, I wanted to understand. I wanted to know what that creature could have been. I started thinking of different possibilities. Was it some kind of local spirit tied to the land or the clinic? Was it something from a story I had heard before but did not remember clearly? The shape of the creature, its gray skin, horn, and tail, made me think about demons. In so many stories, demons are described with horns and strange bodies, sometimes with tails. I started to wonder if what I saw at the top of that tree was a demon. I asked myself quiet questions in my head. Can a demon show itself like that, almost solid, perched on a tree like a person, looking as real as any other human being? I always thought that demons would be more like shadows, dark shapes hanging around in the corners of rooms, hiding in the edges of the eye, or maybe just voices in someone's head. But this thing I saw looked almost solid, like a real body outlined by moonlight. It did not feel like smoke or illusion at the time. It felt like flesh, bone, and something unnatural mixed together. Those questions did not have easy answers. I knew that some people would say it was all in my imagination, that maybe I was a child with sharp eyes and an active mind, that I might have seen a man up in the tree and turned him into a monster in my head. But I also knew the reactions of the others that night, the "Ano yun?" that slipped from their lips. That part is what makes it hard for me to dismiss my experience as imagination. If I was the only one who saw it, I might be more willing to doubt myself. But I was not alone. People around my mother and me saw something up there too. They might not have seen all the details I saw, but they definitely saw something strange enough to make them talk. So now, as someone older, as someone who has had more time to think and who is brave enough to speak openly about that memory, I carry the questions with me. I do not have a final, complete answer about what that creature was. All I can say with certainty is that on a cool, bright night in a small town in Cameron's Norte, when I was a child walking with my pregnant mother toward a little restaurant for tapsilog and fries, I looked up and saw something at the top of a tree near the public clinic. Something gray-skinned, almost naked, with what looked like a horn and a tail, sitting high in the branches beside the bright round moon. It was not a man. It was not normal. And even now, many years later, the memory of it sits inside me, clear and solid, like that figure once sat against the night sky, watching all of us below. Last December, our college block decided to do something different for our Christmas party, because we all knew deep down that it would be our last Christmas together as one complete class, and none of us wanted it to be just another ordinary party in some classroom or cheap rented function room with plastic chairs and weak air conditioning. We wanted a memory that would stand out when we looked back years later, something we could talk about when we were older and already working, something we could say was, "That time we were still in college and did something a little crazy." So instead of staying in Manila like we usually did, someone suggested we go out of town, even if only for a night, and rent a private pool where we could swim, sing, eat, and just be loud without worrying about disturbing neighbors. Since most of us were Manila kids, Bulacan came up quickly as the best choice. It was close enough that travel would not feel like a huge hassle, but far enough that it felt like an actual trip. Besides, we heard that the prices there for renting a pool were very reasonable, especially if the cost was split among the whole block. After a bit of talking and some playful arguing, almost everyone agreed. Only a few classmates could not come because of family reasons or other commitments, but the majority decided to join, and that alone filled me with excitement. We booked a pool in Bulacan from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., a full 12 hours of access. To make sure we arrived in time to prepare and adjust, we planned to leave Manila around 4 p.m. When the day finally came, I remember the air having that mix of Christmas feeling and end-of-semester exhaustion. Some of us were still thinking about final requirements, but most just wanted to rest and have fun. We met up in the afternoon with our bags, some bringing extra food, others carrying speakers, cameras, drinks, and random things that they thought would be fun to have around. The ride going to Bulacan felt like a field trip. People were chatting loudly, laughing, taking photos, playing music from their phones, and joking about who would be the first to jump into the pool later. The traffic going out of the city was not as bad as usual, or maybe I was just too distracted by the noise and energy around me to notice. Through the windows, the tall buildings slowly turned into smaller structures, then houses, and then more open spaces, fields, and roadside trees. The sky was already starting to dim as we went farther away from the city. The sun was halfway gone when we finally reached our destination. I cannot remember the exact name of the place, but I recall that the area was called something like Sitio Gitna. Gitna, in Tagalog, means middle, so I joked to myself that we were indeed somewhere in the middle of Bulacan, in the middle of nowhere, and the middle of our last college Christmas together. The place itself had a quiet, tucked-away feel, like it was a small corner of the province that most people would only know about through word of mouth. When we got off the vehicle and stepped into the property, I took a moment to look around. There were nipa huts arranged around the pool, a few trees, and faint outlines of other houses or structures beyond the walls. The concrete pool lay at the center like a calm rectangle of water, reflecting the darkening sky. The air felt cooler than in Manila, and there was something about the silence of the surroundings that made even our loud voices seem softer, as if the place absorbed sound differently. It was a nice place, calm, almost peaceful. At the same time, it had a slightly eerie feel, not in a threatening way, but more like the feeling you'd get when you know you are far from the usual noise and movement of the city. Still, instead of being scared, I felt like the place was welcoming us. It was as if it was used to hosting people who came to have fun, to celebrate, but also to enter its quiet world for a short time. As soon as we arrived, our classmates started moving like bees in every direction. Some of the boys took charge of setting up the karaoke, dragging wires, plugging in mics, and testing songs. A group of more responsible classmates went straight to the cooking and preparation areas to start working on dinner, grilling, chopping, and organizing food. Others began arranging bags and clothes inside the huts, claiming sleeping spaces, taking photos, and posting quick updates online so their families and friends would know they had arrived safely and were already enjoying themselves. I found myself wandering into one of the nipa huts and sitting there for a while, letting the wooden floor support my tired legs and watching everyone from that slightly elevated point. From that position, I could see the pool, the open space, and the sky above us that was now turning from orange to deep blue, with a few early stars starting to appear. As the evening went on, the sounds grew livelier. The karaoke began blasting songs, some out of tune but full of heart. Plates and utensils clinked as dinner was prepared and served. People ate, sang, took photos, and moved from one group to another, catching up, gossiping, joking, and sometimes just quietly sitting and taking in the cool air. The hours slipped by. Soon, it was well into the night, and the party had settled into that comfortable plateau where people had already eaten and were now scattered into smaller groups, doing whatever they felt like, some still singing, others talking in circles around food, while a few had already tried the pool and were laughing in their wet clothes. Around past 1 in the morning, after spending time talking with different friends and getting a bit chilly from the night air, I decided to go back to one of the huts and rest there. By then, the cold was starting to seep in through my clothes, and even if it was December, being near water while the air turned cooler made it feel even colder. Inside the hut, I could still hear distant singing and the occasional splash from the pool, but everything felt softened by the late hour and the long day. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to relax for a bit. After around an hour or so, when the time was nearing 2 in the morning, some of my friends came into the hut and asked if I wanted to join them. They said they wanted to play in the pool one last time before heading to the showers and grabbing a quick nap before sunrise and going home. There was something childlike and sweet about their invitation. Even though it was beyond what most people would call godly hours, they wanted just one last round in the water to complete the night. I hesitated for a moment because I was already feeling cold, and I knew the water would be even colder at that time, but I also did not want to be a killjoy. It was our last Christmas party together. These were people I had spent years with in classrooms, hallways, canteens, and group projects. Saying no to one last silly swim felt wrong. So I pushed myself up, forced a smile, and said yes. We walked back toward the pool area together. The place looked very different compared to when we first arrived. The sky was now fully dark, and the only light came from the lamps around the resort, and maybe a bit of moonlight above. The karaoke had toned down, not as many people were singing anymore. Some of our classmates were already inside the huts, lying down or half asleep, while a few others were still awake but no longer as energetic as earlier. The pool itself was quiet, the surface of the water still except for a few ripples from whoever was still in it. When I finally stepped into the pool, the cold hit me like a sharp hand. It was exactly what I had expected and more. The water felt like it was wrapping my legs with ice. For a moment, I regretted saying yes, but then I looked at my friends' faces, full of that stubborn, playful energy, and I told myself I could endure it for a little while. After a few minutes, my body began to adapt. The cold did not feel as shocking anymore, and soon we were laughing and moving around, splashing each other lightly, trying to shake off the chill with our noise and movement. At one point, one of my friends, the one who was always full of ideas and games, suggested we try something playful. She said we should line up in the pool and she would dive underwater and pass between our legs. like some silly version of a swimming game. We all laughed at the idea. It was childish, but in that moment, childish was exactly what we wanted to be. One of our friends, though, who was probably even more sensitive to the cold or just tired, decided to move toward the warmer end of the pool instead of joining the game. So that left 3 of us directly participating: me, my close friend, and the girl who suggested the game. The 3 of us lined up. My close friend and I stood in the water with our legs slightly apart, side by side, giving enough space for our other friend to dive and pass through underneath. The water came up to about waist or chest level, depending on our heights, and our feet were firmly planted on the pool floor. Even with the lights around, the water below the surface was darker, and once someone went under, it was hard to see exactly what was happening until they came back up. Our friend took a breath, went under, and started swimming between our legs just as she said she would. We stayed still, waiting for her to pass us and come back up behind us. I remember feeling the water move slightly as she rushed past below, but that was it. She did not brush against me, and I did not feel any extra movement around my ankles or feet aside from the usual flow of water in a pool. A moment later, she surfaced behind us, her hair wet and her face breaking into a wide smile as if nothing unusual had happened. We were all laughing because the game itself was funny and ridiculous, and it seemed like just another harmless part of our night. Then, still smiling, she said something that made my laughter stop in my throat. She wiped water from her face and, with a playful tone at first, asked, "Okay, who decided to troll me? I didn't expect that. I had to hold my breath longer so I could get past the 3rd pair of feet." The words hit me like a cold wave that felt even stronger than the water I was standing in. 3rd pair of feet. The way she said it made my mind immediately start counting. There were 4 of us in that part of the pool earlier, but one had moved away to the warmer end and had been standing at a distance from us, clearly out of the way and not part of the game. That should have left only 2 pairs of legs for her to swim through, mine and my close friends. Nothing more. I did not say anything at first. I simply stopped laughing and looked around the pool, scanning the water and the nearby area, as if someone would suddenly appear and say, "Gotcha!" But there were only 3 of us within arm's reach in that part of the pool: me, my close friend, and the girl who had just dived between our legs. The other friend, the one who had withdrawn to the warm end, was still where she had moved earlier, away from us, her distance clear enough that she could not have secretly joined the line above our diving friend. She had stayed in her place, and we had seen her there the whole time. When the girl who dove from under the water realized that no one was reacting to her statement, her smile slowly faded. Her expression shifted from playful to confused. She repeated herself, but this time with a more serious tone. "Guys, there were 3 pairs of feet in there. I know because I touched the last one." Her words hung in the air, heavy and strange. I felt my skin break into goosebumps despite the cold already making me shiver. I tried to replay everything in my head. She was sure she had passed by 3 sets of legs, and she insisted that she had touched the last pair. Her sensitivity to the supernatural was something we already knew about. This was not the kind of girl who would joke about sensing things. She was very careful whenever we talked about spirits, ghosts, or anything unexplained. She saw her gift, if we can call it that, as something serious, not a toy or a party trick. She did not use it to scare people for fun. Because of that, I knew immediately that she was not lying or teasing us. I also knew my own experience. I did not feel her touch me when she swam under, and our other friend beside me did not say anything about being touched either. Logically, there should have been only 2 pairs of feet, and I should have felt something if she brushed against me. The fact that she insisted she felt a 3rd pair of feet, solid enough to require her to hold her breath longer and make an effort to pass, told us one thing none of us wanted to say out loud. There had been something else in the water with us, something standing near us, invisible but solid enough for her to feel. We all exchanged looks, our faces drained of the laughter from just a few seconds earlier. No one wanted to be the first to say the word ghost. No one wanted to start speculating in detail about what might have joined our little game. We knew it was already well past the time when most people say the boundary between our world and other things becomes thinner. It was beyond midnight, and in many stories, bodies of water are said to be places where spirits sometimes linger or appear. Those thoughts floated through my mind without me fully wanting them. Without saying much, we came to the same conclusion. We did not argue with her, and we did not try to laugh it off or tell her she was imagining things, because deep down, none of us believed that. At the same time, we knew staying in the water any longer after what she had just told us would make all of us even more uncomfortable, maybe even invite something we did not want. So we made an unspoken, unanimous decision. We would not say another word about it while we were still in the pool. We just quietly headed toward the edge, climbed out, and left the water behind us. The cold air outside the pool suddenly felt less important than the thought of what, or who, had been standing next to us under the water. We dried ourselves in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Later, some people went to shower, some went back inside the huts, and a few tried to sleep before sunrise. I could not fully relax. My mind kept returning to that sentence. I had to hold my breath longer so I could get past the third pair of feet. Even now, I have never found out more about what happened in that pool. I did not ask the owner if strange things had occurred there before. I did not go online searching for stories about that resort or that area in Bulacan. Maybe part of me did not want to know, because knowing might confirm that something really was there with us, playing quietly in the cold water long before we ever arrived. Looking back now, I realized that we had gone swimming at an hour when most people are asleep, a time when the world feels thinner and quieter, when even loud voices seem to get swallowed by the night. Some might say that those were not godly hours to be playing in a pool. We thought we were just having fun, trying to squeeze out the last drops of joy from a special night, unaware that the place might not have been completely empty of other, unseen company. And sometimes, when I think about that memory now, I cannot help but wonder, during those few minutes of our game, who really disturbed whom? Were we the ones disturbing something or someone who had been there first, quietly existing in the water and the night? Or did that unseen third pair of feet decide to disturb our playtime, just to remind us that we were not alone? When I think back to my childhood, the house in BF Resort, Las Piñas in Manila always comes to mind first, not because it was the most beautiful place I ever lived in, but because it was the strangest, the heaviest, and the one filled with the most unexplainable things that still cling to my memory even now. My family used to own that house, and while I was growing up there as a little boy, I heard so many stories and lived through so many moments that I still cannot fully explain. These things did not only happen to me but also to my mother, our relatives, our housemaids, some carpenters, and even friends who stepped inside the property. It was like the house had its own life, its own doorway where different spirits and energies came and went as they pleased, and we were simply stuck there sharing space with things we could not see. According to what I was told, long before I started remembering anything, there was already something strange about the house. When my grandfather first bought it from my mom and dad, there was a huge crack that ran right across the living room floor, cutting through it like some old scar that no one really understood. It was not a small crack that comes naturally with time. It was big and noticeable, as if something heavy had happened there. My dad said that they bought the house from a lady who used to live there with her Japanese live-in partner. There was a rumor that this woman had killed the Japanese man so she could inherit his money, a story that may or may not be true, but the fact that the story was repeated so casually by the neighbors made it feel like the house already had a dark history even before we moved in. I do not know if that rumor was real, if it happened in that living room, or if that big crack had anything to do with any of it. But as I grew older and experienced more, I could not help but connect the two in my mind, like the house had absorbed whatever violence or pain had taken place and carried it with it for years. When I was still a baby, my parents had to hire a maid to take care of me because my mother worked and could not always be at home. Sometimes I stayed with my grandparents, but on days when I stayed at the house, the maid looked after me. One day, my mother came home and walked into what turned into one of our early strange experiences in that house. She entered and saw the maid speaking wildly, pacing and talking in a rush, as if arguing with something or terrified by something that no one else could see. She was speaking in her own native dialect, Cebuano. Under normal circumstances, that would not be strange at all, but what shook my mother to the core was that she suddenly understood every word, even though she only spoke Tagalog and English and did not know Cebuano at all. Imagine suddenly understanding a language you never learned, just because someone in your house is frantically speaking it. My mother said it was as if the meaning of the maid's words slid directly into her mind without any effort, and that realization terrified her even more than the sight of the frightened maid. She panicked and quickly looked around for me, worried that something might have happened to me while she was gone. It was only when she remembered that she had left me with my grandparents that she felt a bit of relief. So she focused on what the maid was saying. According to the maid, she had been ironing clothes quietly when suddenly the whole house appeared to go up in flames. She said she could see fire everywhere, licking the walls, the ceiling, even the floor, like everything was burning all at once. But the strange part was that although she saw flames everywhere, nothing was actually being consumed. Nothing was turning black. There was no smoke, no smell of burning wood or cloth, no heat singeing her skin, just the horrible sight of the entire house engulfed in fire. To her, it felt real. To anyone else standing there was nothing. Yet she panicked and screamed because in her mind, she and everything in the house were about to burn. When my mother realized that the maid was clearly experiencing something that the physical house was not showing, something she could not see but could strangely understand, she knew that something was wrong in a way that went beyond any normal explanation. Needless to say, by the next morning, my parents were already looking for a new maid. They did not want to risk leaving me there under the care of someone who might suddenly be thrown into a vision of fire while alone with a baby, and at the same time, I imagine they did not want to stay too close to that kind of experience either. It was as if the house had already given them a small preview of the kind of things it could show to people. As the years passed, I grew older, and the house continued to be our home. When I was around 6 years old, my mother finally decided to have the house blessed. I think she had already gathered enough strange experiences and stories by then to feel that normal cleaning and repairs were not enough, that she needed some spiritual help as well. I can still remember that day vividly, even though I was only a small boy. I was inside the master's bedroom, very casually watching a horror movie, which now seems a bit ironic considering what was happening in the rest of the house. At that age, I did not fully understand why adults did the things they did when it came to religion and rituals. It was just another day to me until my mom called out to me, telling me to come out because a priest had arrived and was going to bless the house. I went out and saw the priest walking around our living room, sprinkling holy water, murmuring prayers, and doing everything priests usually do when they bless a house. At first, it looked like a normal scene, but then strange things started to happen again. While the priest was blessing the living room, our dog, Saki, kept biting and gnawing at the priest's clothes, specifically the bottom part of his vestments. Saki was not an aggressive dog by nature. She was playful and friendly, the kind of dog that greeted you with a wagging tail. But at that moment, she was restless and would not stop tugging at what the priest was wearing, as if she wanted to pull him away from that spot or was reacting to something around him that we could not see. The priest tried to stay calm and continue his blessing, but it was obvious that the dog's behavior was not normal. Then, as he moved on to bless the kitchen, another strange thing happened. In the kitchen, we had an aquarium near the area where the priest threw holy water. As soon as he blessed that part of the house, the fish inside the aquarium suddenly went wild. They started jumping out of the water, one after another, as if something had startled or attacked them. Some managed to fall back into the tank, but some landed outside, flopping desperately on the surface until they ran out of strength and died from lack of water. It was a shocking sight for a child, to see small, harmless fish suddenly jump to their deaths for no visible reason. The timing of it all, happening right as the house was being blessed, was impossible to ignore. For a child, it felt like the house was reacting to the blessing, like something inside it was being disturbed and was trying to resist or show its presence through the animals that could sense what we could not. After the blessing, you would think things would calm down or improve. but the house remained the same strange place. A few days after that, my mother and I were watching The Exorcist together, which in hindsight was probably not the best choice of movie given everything going on around us. Still, it was playing, and we watched it. Right after the film ended, we turned off the television and started to settle down. I lay down with my pillow, expecting to rest, when suddenly I felt my pillow start to press down on its own. It was as if an invisible hand was pushing into it right beside my head, slowly and firmly. The pressure was very clear, and I knew it was not just me shifting or moving my head around because I was still. It was as if someone or something else was sharing that pillow with me, pushing it down without caring how I felt about it. I looked at my mother, who was nearby, and told her what I was feeling. She looked back at me, and I noticed that her face did not show shock the way you would expect. She just stared for a moment, and calmly told me to ignore it, to not pay attention to it, and to try to sleep. So that was what I tried to do. At that age, I trusted her completely, so if she said to ignore it, I did. It was only years later when she told me the truth, that she had been absolutely terrified at that moment. She had seen the fear in my eyes and knew that the last thing I needed was to see panic in hers, so she forced herself to stay calm, to act like it was nothing, even though she was deeply unsettled inside. She said that she did not want to give whatever was causing it more power by reacting. It took a lot of strength for her to pretend everything was fine while she too was wondering what kind of house we were really living in. For a while after that, nothing very dramatic or obvious happened. Life continued. I grew older. I went to school, made friends, and slowly spent more and more time at my grandparents' place. There were periods when the house was quiet, but even in those quiet times, there were still small, strange details that felt off. One of our nannies at one time, for example, would keep telling me not to pray. She would say that God did not exist, that there was no point in praying to anyone. It is not normal for a nanny to tell a child that, especially in a country where most people grow up surrounded by religious ideas. I do not know what her beliefs were or what she had experienced that made her say such things, but in the context of that house, with everything I know now, it just adds to the heaviness of its story, like one more layer of something that did not quite belong. When I was around 9 years old, my parents decided to have the house renovated and extend my room. They wanted to expand it, which meant they needed to break the front wall of my room, the one facing outside. Just beyond that wall stood a huge mango tree, old and thick, with strong branches reaching out as if trying to touch the house. During the renovation, the front part of my room became exposed, and the only thing separating the inside of the room from the outside mango tree area was a clear plastic cover. It was thin enough that if you stood in my room and looked straight ahead, you could clearly see the tree and the space around it as if you were looking through a window. We hired a head carpenter to oversee the renovation work. Over time, as is often the case when people live and work in close quarters, he and one of our maids became close and eventually became a couple. Since work ran late, and it was convenient, they ended up sleeping in my room while it was still under construction, right near that plastic-covered opening that showed the mango tree. One night, the carpenter later told my mother, he woke up suddenly for no apparent reason. It was dark, but the faint light from outside allowed him to see the outline of the tree beyond the plastic. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed that there was a girl in white walking in front of the mango tree. At first, he assumed it was our maid, Sally. Maybe she had gotten up to go outside or just walk around to get some air. So he called out her name in a normal tone, expecting her to look at him and ask what he wanted. The girl in white, however, did not respond. She just stood there, facing away or sideways, not reacting to his voice at all. He grew a little annoyed and called her again, more loudly this time. "Sally!" Still, the girl did not move or answer. Feeling uneasy now, he turned to his side, perhaps to shake her shoulder or ask why she was ignoring him. But when he looked, he saw that Sally was lying beside him, still asleep, her breathing steady and her body relaxed, clearly unaware of anything happening. That was when it sank in that whoever he had been calling was not Sally at all. The girl outside in white was someone or something else. and the realization that they had been sharing that room and that night with another presence shook him deeply. This was just one more story in a growing pile of strange events tied to that house. As I got older, I started spending more and more time with my grandparents, who eventually played a big role in raising me. The connection with the house and BF resort slowly weakened, and my visits there became less frequent. But still, there were a few more moments before that chapter of my life ended. One of the last times I visited, when I was around 13 years old, I remember sitting at the dining table. It was an ordinary moment. The house was quiet. I was either eating or just sitting there thinking about nothing in particular, when suddenly the television, which had been turned off, switched on by itself. No one was holding the remote. No one had pressed any buttons. It just turned on and immediately flicked over to a blank channel, showing nothing but static, that gray, buzzing, moving pattern that fills the screen when no signal exists. The sound of static filled the room, loud and harsh, and the bright flickering of the screen cut through the calm. It felt like the house was reminding me that even if I tried to ignore it, it was still capable of moving things on its own. Later, as I grew even older, my mother shared with me a few things that I had apparently done as a kid but did not remember. She told me that when I was young, I would sometimes wake up at night and point to a window in her bedroom, the one that faced a big dahat tree outside. I would point at that window and say that there was a dark man calling me. I do not remember doing that, but I can imagine how frightening it must have been for her to hear her child say that someone outside in the darkness was calling to him. She said that it happened more than once, and each time, the feeling it brought into the room was chilling. She also told me that there were times when she would be quietly resting in her room, not sleeping yet, just lying there, when she would suddenly see a ballerina appear. This ballerina would enter by passing through one wall, as if the solid surface did not exist, then dance in front of her for a while, performing gentle, graceful movements, before exiting again through the next wall on the other side of the room. The ballerina did not attack or scream. She just danced quietly, but the fact that she passed through walls and chose my mother's room as her stage was unsettling, to say the least. It was as if the house did not only attract frightening images but also trapped random spirits in fixed routines that repeated again and again. Eventually, my mother moved away from that house entirely and relocated to Baguio, a city in the mountains, to take care of one of our businesses there. By then, I was already older and more independent. At one point, I was asked if I wanted to take the house for myself, to live in it as my own place. The suggestion might have sounded reasonable on the surface because having your own house in Manila is not something to dismiss easily. But my answer was clear in my heart, even if I laughed it off outwardly. There was no way I wanted to stay in that house alone or even with other people. I knew its stories. I had felt its weight. I had seen the fear it brought to others. So instead of taking it as my home, I made the decision to sell it, and I did it quickly. I sold it to the first bidder who made an offer. Before the final sale, curiosity mixed with caution, and I brought along a friend of mine who had an open third eye, someone who was known to be sensitive to spirits and the unseen. I did not tell her any of the house's history beforehand. I wanted to see what she would feel if she walked into the place without any prior knowledge or suggestions. We visited the house together, and at first, everything seemed normal from the outside. But as soon as we were done and got back into the car, I saw that she was crying. She looked shaken, angry even, and she asked me why I had brought her there without any warning. She said that inside the house, especially near my old room, she had seen an old man floating and waving to her from above, as if he was trying to get her attention, maybe even greet her or acknowledge her presence. She was disturbed by what she had seen because she had not expected it, and had not been emotionally prepared to encounter that kind of spirit in such a strong way. Hearing that from her, someone whose sensitivity I trusted, was like the final confirmation of everything I already felt about the house. I remembered my mother telling me that the priest once said our house was like a portal, a place where random spirits passed through, coming and going as they liked, using our space as some sort of crossing point. That idea alone is enough to make anyone's skin crawl. She had also told me stories of ballerinas in her room, dark men at windows, cracks on the floor, Japanese partners rumored to have been murdered, dogs biting priests' vestments, fish jumping to their deaths, maids seeing fire that did not burn, nannies denying God's existence, girls in white under mango trees, televisions switching to static. And now my friend with an open third eye crying because an old man was waving at her from my former room. Put together, it all painted a picture of a house that was never really just a house. It was a crossroads, a place where the living tried to build a normal life while the dead or lost or wandering spirits continued to travel through, leaving traces of themselves behind in the form of visions, sounds, and movements. In the end, there was truly no way I was ever going to live there. Selling it to the first bidder and walking away was not just a financial decision. It was a choice for my own peace of mind, a way for me to finally close a chapter filled with things I could never fully understand but had no desire to keep experiencing ever again. I grew up in a Catholic family, the kind where prayers before meals were automatic, Sundays meant Mass whether you liked it or not, and religious images watched you from the walls like quiet guardians. As I got older, though, something in my mind started to change. I didn't turn into a hardcore atheist who hated religion, but I slowly moved away from the idea of following any specific church. My thoughts about God turned softer and less defined. I found myself somewhere between belief and doubt, like standing on a bridge between two lands. I still believed there had to be something more, guiding or watching humanity, or at least something beyond what we can see, but I could no longer say with full confidence what that something was. You could say my views became almost agnostic, with a touch of deism. I still think about spiritual things at least once or twice a day. It's like a quiet habit that never went away, even when I stopped going to church regularly. Sometimes I'd look at the sky and wonder, sometimes I'd think about the soul, sometimes I'd question life after death. And although I don't claim to have any sixth sense or special gift, there have been moments in my life that felt too strange, too precise, or too gentle to simply call them coincidences. Those moments didn't turn me back into a religious person, but they did nudge me away from complete skepticism. One of those moments happened a few years ago, in 2012, during a trip to the Philippines. I still carry it quietly in my mind, like a small glowing stone. It was in the latter half of April 2012 when my parents and I went to the Philippines for a short stay. Part of our trip included spending some time in Angeles City, Pampanga, where my maternal grandmother lived. She didn't live alone, she shared the house with my uncle and aunt. They hadn't always been in that house. Before, they lived in a place just across the street. My other uncle, the one working abroad and earning better money, had helped fund the new house and had it fixed up and revamped before the three of them moved in. By the time we arrived, they had already been living there for around 4 years, so the house had settled into them and they had settled into the house. The house itself was a single-story structure with a quiet, lived-in feeling. It wasn't one of those huge mansions you see in rich subdivisions, but it was nicer than many houses in the area. There was a small but pretty garden in front, with plants that my grandmother liked to care for. She had always been fond of plants. Even when she was tired or in a bad mood, her face would soften a bit when she talked about her flowers, the shape of the leaves, or whether this or that plant needed more water. The house had 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. My grandma's room had its own bathroom, and so did my aunt's. The other rooms were more basic, but comfortable enough for guests or relatives who visited every now and then. During our stay, it was decided that my aunt would temporarily share her bedroom with my grandmother, and my parents and I would use my grandmother's room. That way, we weren't scattered across different rooms and we could all be near each other. My grandma's room was spacious, more so than a typical bedroom. When you walked in, it didn't feel cramped at all. There were 4 windows, each with drapes hanging neatly, giving the room a soft, homey look. These windows were placed in such a way that, during the day, the room could be lit by natural light if you pulled the curtains aside. At night, you could close them to create a sense of privacy and safety. On one side of the room stood a large cabinet or wardrobe where my grandma kept her clothes, some special dresses, and old things she probably couldn't throw away because of the memories attached to them. Near the door, mounted on the wall, was a big mirror. It reflected not just faces, but parts of the room, making it look even bigger. There was also a dresser with items neatly arranged on top: combs, perfume bottles, creams, maybe a small rosary, and other everyday things that showed a life of routine and habit. Against one wall was a modern touch, a flat-screen TV that my uncle had bought for my grandma, wanting her to enjoy her shows in comfort. In different corners of the room, there were 2 sets of chairs with little end tables between them, forming small sitting areas. One set was placed near a window. I imagined my grandma sitting there in the morning, sipping coffee or salabat, looking outside and thinking about the past, or about what to cook for lunch. Since all 3 of us, my mother, my father, and I, were going to sleep in that room, we had to arrange things carefully. The main bed belonged to my grandmother, but during our stay, my parents used it. There was enough space on the floor near the windows to place a mattress, and that spot became my bed. They laid a mattress on the floor close to the windows, and that's where I slept. It wasn't uncomfortable, and I didn't mind lying close to the floor. There was something reassuring about being near the windows, too, even though the glass separated us from the outside world. At night, the room was never fully dark. My grandmother had a glow-in-the-dark clock on the wall, its soft green numbers faint but clear enough to catch your eye if you woke up and needed to know the time. There was also a small night light kept on, just enough to keep the darkness from swallowing the whole room. The combination of those 2 light sources gave the room a quiet, dim glow at night, enough that you could see the outlines of furniture, the bed, the windows, and the people sleeping. By the time we had been there 3 or 4 nights, I had grown used to the rhythm of the house. Days were filled with relatives talking, the television in the living room playing shows in Tagalog, the sound of tricycles passing outside, and the smell of food being cooked. Nights were calmer. The air cooled a little, but because it was April in the Philippines, it was still warm enough that air conditioning was considered a blessing. On that particular night, the one that never really left my memory, I woke up sometime between midnight and 3 in the morning. I don't remember the exact time, but I know it was that quiet window when most people in the house were deep in sleep and the world seemed thinner and softer, as if everything was holding its breath. The air conditioning in my grandma's room was on high. The thermostat dial was at around 8, and it went only up to 10. At that setting, the cold air blew steadily and strongly into the room, making it feel almost like a refrigerator. It was the kind of cold that slowly seeped through your blanket, then into your skin and bones. I remember lying on my right side, my body curled up a bit, with my back facing the windows behind me. In front of me, across a small distance of floor, was the air conditioner. The airflow seemed to be pushing directly toward my side of the room, so I got the full force of the chill. My blanket was thin, more suitable for a slightly cool night, not for the way the AC was humming and blowing like it wanted to freeze the whole room. I pulled my knees closer to my chest instinctively, trying to make myself smaller, trying to keep as much warmth inside my body as possible. As I lay there half awake, resisting the urge to fully get up and turn the thermostat down, I became aware of a different kind of feeling. It was very subtle, but very clear at the same time. The feeling of being watched. It was not a loud noise or a sudden movement that woke me. I was already awake. It was more like the sudden awareness that someone's eyes were on me, studying me quietly. The hairs at the back of my neck seemed to rise without any wind. My mind sharpened in an instant, even though my body still felt heavy with sleep. I did not want to move too much, but I could not ignore it either. My eyes, half opened, caught something in the corner of my vision, someone standing by the window behind me. I did not want to turn my head too quickly, as if moving fast would make whatever it was react. So I let my eyes shift first, slowly. Then I carefully glanced over my right shoulder, just enough to see what was there. By the window, in the soft dim light of the room, stood a lady in white. She was not a blur of white. She had a shape, the figure of a woman. She had long dark hair that fell down smoothly, framing her face and shoulders. Her body, her clothes, and her face looked a bit misty, not as sharp or solid as a living person would appear, but there was no doubt that she was there. The strange thing was that even though her features were not perfectly defined in that half-light, I somehow knew she was beautiful. It's hard to explain. I did not study her face in detail, but something about her presence carried a softness and a calm beauty. It was like my mind understood her as beautiful, even if my eyes could not fully focus on all the details. She was standing still, looking down at me. That was what made me most aware of her. She didn't seem angry or threatening. She was not making any move to come closer or reach out, at least not at that moment. She was just there, watching. Her white clothing was simple, not fancy or sparkling, just plain white, which in the dim glow of the room looked like both light and shadow at the same time. For a second or two, our awareness overlapped. Me partially turned, seeing her there, and her gaze already fixed on me. Then instinct took over. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was shyness, maybe it was just the human reaction to something your brain cannot fully process. I quickly turned my head back toward the direction of the air conditioner, away from the window. I shut my eyes tightly and pretended to be asleep, as if closing my eyes could erase what I had just seen. My heart was beating a little faster now. I did not dare move my body, even though part of me wanted to pull the blanket over my head. But another part of me didn't want to show that I was frightened or awake. It sounded childish inside my head, but I thought, if I pretend to be sleeping, maybe she'll go away or leave me alone. I don't know how long I lay there like that, with my eyes closed and my back still facing her. In that silence, I began to feel something else. I felt the cold of the air conditioning more sharply now that I was aware of everything, and I pulled my thin blanket closer. Then, gently, I felt motion near my shoulders and neck. Soft hands, or at least something that felt like hands, took hold of the edge of my blanket and pulled it up higher, tucking it around my neck and part of my face, as if someone was making sure I was fully covered and warm. The movement was slow, careful, not rough or hurried. It reminded me of how a mother or grandmother might tuck in a child at night when they think the child might be cold. There was no weight pressing down on my body, no sudden push, just the quiet, precise motion of someone fixing a blanket. In that moment, all my fears softened a little. The feeling of being watched changed into something else, the feeling of being cared for. I didn't open my eyes. I just let it happen, let the blanket be adjusted. My body started to relax almost immediately afterward. It was as if the act of being tucked in triggered a deep wave of comfort and sleepiness. Within moments of feeling the blanket being fixed, I drifted off and fell back into sleep, almost as if I was being lulled into it by that gentle action. When morning came and I woke up in the daylight, the memory came back to me clearly. I remembered waking up in the night. I remembered the cold air, the AC at high, the position of my body facing the AC with my back to the windows. I remembered seeing the lady in white by the window, her blurred but beautiful presence, and I remembered the feeling of my blanket being pulled up to my neck. But I also knew that sometimes dreams can feel real, especially when you are half awake. So I lay there wondering, was it a dream or did it really happen? I did not jump up and panic. Instead, I quietly replayed the sequence in my mind. The difference was that I knew at one point I had clearly been awake. I remembered the heaviness of my body, the awareness of my surroundings, and the conscious decision to pretend to be asleep. It did not feel like the random nonsense of dreams. Later that morning, when things were calm and normal, my grandma moving around the house, my aunt doing her tasks, my father busy with something, I asked my mother a simple question. "Did you stand next to me when I was sleeping last night? Were you the one who fixed my blanket?" She answered no. She had not gotten out of bed in the middle of the night to stand by the mattress. Even if she had, I knew something didn't match. The lady I had seen had long dark hair and wore white. My mother's hair at that time was shoulder length, not long enough to match what I saw. She had also not been wearing white to sleep that night. I remembered the color of her clothes. The presence I saw standing there did not match my mother's shape or style. It was most definitely not my grandmother or my aunt either. Both of them sleep differently, and neither had the long hair, white outfit look of the figure I saw. My grandmother would not have quietly tiptoed into the room and stood by the window like that without making more noise. My aunt's movements are also more obvious and noticeable. The figure I saw was either of them. Once I realized it could not have been any of the living women in the house that night, the questions started rising in my mind. Who was the lady in white? Why did she appear, if she really did? Was she someone connected to the house? Was she just passing through? Or was she something else entirely? Something from a different plane or level of reality that my mind could barely grasp? I did not bring it up to the whole family in a dramatic way. I didn't gather them in the living room and say, "Guess what I saw?" Instead, I quietly held the memory and lightly mentioned it only in small pieces. My mother did not tell me I was crazy. She didn't give any firm explanation either. The house was old, that much I knew, although it had been renovated. Old houses tend to gather stories, secrets, and sometimes quiet sadness. I won't go into the full details about my mother's side of the family, but I can say that things there are not perfectly peaceful. There is some dysfunction, some old wounds, some unspoken resentments. When you're a child visiting relatives, you don't always understand the reasons behind the sharp tones, the silent treatments, or the quick arguments, but you feel the heaviness in the air. Even as an adult, I can feel that my maternal family carries a kind of constant tension, a sadness that never fully dissolves. I have sometimes wondered if certain spirits, energies, or whatever you want to call them, visit houses like that. Maybe they are drawn to places where emotions are unsettled, where there are cracks in the harmony. Or maybe, on the other hand, some spirits come to bring balance, to bring small moments of care in the middle of the stiffness and pain. The lady I saw that night was dressed in white. In many cultures, white can symbolize peace, innocence, purification, or even mourning, depending on context. In spiritual stories, ladies in white can sometimes be restless ghosts, but in other stories, they are protective presences that watch over sleeping people, especially children or those who are suffering silently. I cannot say with certainty what she was. I do not know if she was a saint, a random spirit, an ancestor, or simply a trick of my half-awake brain. But when I think of her, I often choose to see her as a peaceful presence. She did not harm me. She did not try to scare me. She seemed to stand there, observing quietly, and when she moved, her action was one of kindness, tucking my blanket up to my neck because she knew I was cold. In a house that may have carried some emotional weight, where there was some quiet sadness that no one fully named, I like to think that she visited to bring a small moment of comfort and care, even if it was only for a short minute in the dark. During the rest of our stay in that house, I never saw her again. There were no more late-night visits, no more gentle hands adjusting my blanket, no white figure standing by the window when I turned my head. Life continued as usual for those remaining days. Family conversations, meals, visits to other relatives, trips outside, then finally packing up and leaving. On the surface, everything went back to normal. Yet that one encounter stayed with me. It did not force me back into strict religion. It did not make me suddenly start going to church every Sunday again. But it softened something inside me. It reminded me that maybe the world is slightly wider and stranger than what we see with our daytime eyes. It made me feel that there might be gentle presences around us sometimes, especially when we are most vulnerable and cold, who quietly adjust our blankets and leave without expecting recognition or thanks. Whether she was a dream or a real spirit, that memory became one of the small reasons why, even as I stand in a more questioning, in-between space with my beliefs, I still hold on to the idea that there is something more working in the background of our lives. It was a cloudy afternoon, the kind of afternoon that makes the sky look low and heavy, but still bright enough to feel like the day could go on forever, and Christmas break had just begun in our village, so there was a special kind of excitement in the air that only children really understand. The streets were more alive than usual, with kids running in different directions, shouting, laughing, and playing all sorts of games, from tag-a-tagwin to tumbang presso to simple games of chasing each other with no clear rules at all. I was one of those kids, sweaty and out of breath, not even thinking about time or tiredness while I ran up and down the street with my friends. We did not care that the clouds were thick or that the wind sometimes felt a little cooler. For us, it was enough that there was no school, no homework, and the promise of noche buena and gifts hanging in the air everywhere like an invisible decoration. After a while, though, even the most excited kid feels his throat dry and his legs heavy, and I finally felt how tired I was from running around. My breath was starting to come out in short bursts, my shirt was clinging to my back, and my mouth felt sticky and thirsty. That was when I decided to stop and go back home to get a drink of water before going out to play again. As I walked back toward our house, the noise of the kids outside slowly faded behind me, replaced by the quieter sounds inside our home, the muffled hum of indoor life, and the faint jingles of Christmas songs coming from somewhere in the neighborhood. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt a little cooler, and the smell of something familiar and homely greeted me, like the scent of the curtains, the wooden furniture, and a bit of food that had been cooked earlier. Just as I was heading to the kitchen to get my drink, I heard my brother's voice from the living room. He was calling out to my sister, asking her to take a photo of him using the camera on her new Nokia phone. At that time, having a phone with a camera felt like a big thing, especially for kids like us who were still excited about seeing ourselves in pictures without needing a big, separate camera. My sister sounded amused and slightly annoyed, but she agreed, because she was still proud of her new phone and liked using it. As I poured water into a glass and brought it to my lips, the coldness of it felt like heaven in my dry throat. While I was drinking, my brother moved to stand beside the Christmas tree, which my family had set up in the corner of the living room. The tree was decorated with colorful balls, shiny ribbons, and blinking lights that made it look magical, especially for kids like us who always associated it with gifts and Christmas Eve. My brother posed beside it, trying to look cool or maybe funny, while my sister stood a few steps back with her phone raised, getting the right angle. I walked over and positioned myself just behind my sister's shoulders so I could see the screen and watch how the photo would turn out. I remember leaning a bit closer, the glass of water still in my hand, curious and relaxed, thinking only about the simple fun of seeing my brother's picture with the tree. But just before my sister pressed the button to take the shot, something happened that made my calm, ordinary afternoon twist into something I would never forget. Out of nowhere, I saw a woman pass behind my brother. At first, my mind did not fully catch up with what my eyes were seeing. She was moving smoothly, not in a rush, just crossing behind him as if she also wanted to be in the picture. She was wearing a white veil that covered part of her head and flowed down over a white dress, giving her a soft but eerie appearance, like someone from an old wedding or maybe a figure from a funeral or a procession. The white of her clothes stood out sharply against the colors of the Christmas tree and the shadows of the room. But it was her face that truly froze me. Her eyes were all white, not in the natural way of someone with light-colored eyes, but completely white, with no pupils, no dark center, nothing that made them look human. It was like someone had erased the middle of her eyes and left them empty and pale. That sight shocked me so much that I felt my own eyes widen without control, my body stiffening as a cold feeling crawled up my spine even though the house itself was not cold at all. For a moment, time felt slowed. I did not scream, but my mind was racing, trying to understand what I had just seen. I stared at my brother, then at the space behind him, but the woman had already passed. My heart was pounding, but I remembered enough to react, and I turned to my sister, who still held the phone in her hands. With my voice a bit shaky, I asked her if I could see the photo she had just taken. I wanted proof, something to tell me that I was not imagining it. But when I asked, she quickly refused, her face tense. She did not joke or tease me, she just said that she had deleted the picture. Her eyes looked scared, not confused. The expression on her face told me that she had seen something herself, something she did not want to keep in her phone or show to anyone. The way she looked at me made my stomach sink. She did not even have to say what she had seen, because her reaction already answered the question I had not yet formed out loud. Whatever it was that I had seen with my own eyes, she had seen it too, caught in that short moment before she rushed to delete it. But we did not talk about it in detail then. Maybe we were both too scared, or maybe we did not know how to put it into words. All I knew was that there had been a woman in white, passing behind my brother, with empty white eyes, and whatever she was not just some visitor casually walking in our living room. That was the first experience, the first time something truly strange slipped into my ordinary life at home and left a mark that stayed in my memory like a stain on glass that never goes away completely no matter how much you try to rub it off. Life went on after that. The days moved forward, school terms came and went, birthdays and holidays passed as usual. But that memory stayed at the back of my mind, sometimes growing faint, sometimes coming back sharply when I saw something white in my peripheral vision. And as I grew older, strange things did not stop happening. A few years after that first experience by the Christmas tree, something else happened, this time late at night, when the world is quiet and the darkness seems to open doors to things you cannot see in the day. By this time, I was already a bit older, and for Christmas my mother gave me a Walkman as a gift. It was the kind of small music player that could tune into FM radio and play songs through earphones. What made it special for me was that it had a built-in flashlight, a small one, but enough to light up dark corners. I was really fond of that Walkman. It felt like having a little world of my own, where I could listen to music and see in the dark at the same time. I had always had trouble sleeping, even as a kid. Insomnia was like an unwanted friend who would visit me almost every night and refused to leave, while other kids could fall asleep before midnight. I often lay awake in bed, my mind still active, my eyes still open, watching shadows on the ceiling or thinking about random things. Sometimes I would not fall asleep until 2, 3, or even 4 in the morning. That habit naturally made me wake up late most days, and it became part of who I was, the one who was still awake when everyone else was asleep. It was about 3 days after Christmas when something happened that proved to me that the strange didn't care whether you were tired, bored, or trying to distract yourself. That night, as usual, I could not sleep. It was past midnight, maybe closer to 1 or 2 in the morning. The whole house was completely dark and quiet, with my family already in deep sleep. I was lying on my bed with my Walkman pressed to my ears, listening to the FM radio, trying to let the music or voices lull me into sleep. But as the night grew deeper, the radio stations started to shift into their late-night mode. One by one, they began playing old songs, tunes from decades ago that did not mean much to me at that age. The voices of the DJs became slower and more relaxed, and the songs felt distant, like they belonged to a different generation. After a while I grew bored. The music could not distract me anymore, and I felt restless. Then I remembered that my Walkman had a flashlight. Out of simple curiosity and boredom, I decided to play with it. I turned the light on and off, watching the way the small beam cut through the darkness. The faint circle of light felt comforting, something I could control in a house that was otherwise swallowed in black. The idea came to me to leave my bed and go to the bathroom, not because I needed to use it, but because it was one of the darkest parts of the house when the lights were off. I thought it would be fun to see the effect of the flashlight there, like playing with a toy in a dark cave. So I got up, still holding the Walkman, and padded quietly down the hallway, careful not to make noise that might wake anyone. The house felt different at that hour, like it was holding its breath, the familiar furniture now just shapes in the dark. When I reached the bathroom, I stepped inside, closed the door gently behind me, and pointed the flashlight around. Every surface reflected the light in a slightly different way, the tiles on the floor, the sink, the toilet, the walls. The small beam seemed more powerful in that confined space. I started flicking the flashlight on and off, waving my hand around, making the beam dance across the walls and ceiling. Because the whole house was dark and the bathroom had no other source of light, every flicker created moving shadows that stretched and shrank like living things. The effect was almost like being in a room with a disco ball, except the only ball was my hand and a little flashlight in it. I felt like a child again, amused by something so simple. It made the loneliness of being awake at that hour feel less heavy, turning it into a kind of private show. After a while of doing that, I started to feel the weight of tiredness settling into my body. My eyelids felt heavier, and my limbs began to feel sluggish. The boredom that had been nagging at me earlier was now turning into genuine sleepiness. I decided it was time to go back to my room and actually try to sleep. I turned off the flashlight, opened the bathroom door, walked back through the dark hallway, and slipped back into bed. I lay down facing the wall this time, with my back to the rest of the room, the Walkman still with me, the radio playing softly in my ears. The songs were still mostly old ones, but now I did not mind as much. I pulled my blanket up over my legs but not all the way to my head, feeling a mix of comfort and the last remaining energy of the little, light show I had done. Even though I had left the bathroom, I was still not done playing with the flashlight. Lying there in bed, facing the wall, I continued to flick the light on and off, watching its small reflection bounce off the shiny surface of the Walkman's button, using that tiny circle of light as my little toy. Then, in one of those moments when the flashlight was on, something made my fingers go stiff and my breath stop. In the reflection of the button, I saw someone standing behind me. In that tiny, curved reflection, which showed a miniature version of what was behind my back, there was a figure at the edge of my bed. It was not a trick of the light or a shadow shaped by furniture. It was clear enough for my mind to understand what it was seeing: someone, or something, standing there. It was a woman in a white dress, her hair cut to about shoulder length. Unlike the woman by the Christmas tree with the white eyes that I saw years earlier, this one was even more unsettling in a different way. Her face was completely blank. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no features at all. Just a smooth, empty surface where a face should have been, like someone had wiped away all the details that made her human. She was not moving, just standing there at the edge of my bed, very close, almost within reach if I had reached out a hand behind me. In that tiny reflection, I could see her image clearly enough to know that she was real in that moment, that she was not just my imagination. My whole body froze. It was as if my muscles had turned to stone. I could not even twitch my fingers. My mind screamed at me to move, to jump, to run out of the room, but my body refused to obey. The blanket was covering my feet, but not my whole body, and I wanted nothing more than to pull it all the way up, to hide under it like a child hiding from a monster. But I could not even bring myself to grab the edge of the blanket at first. Fear pinned me to the bed harder than any physical weight could. I do not know how long I stared at that reflection. Moments in fear always feel much longer than they actually are. It might have been just seconds, but to me it felt like minutes stretched out, like time itself was being forced to move slowly to make me suffer every second of knowing she was there. My hand was still holding the Walkman, the flashlight still on. Finally, with all the courage I could gather, I turned the flashlight off. Darkness rushed in, heavier than before. I forced my hand to move, inch by inch, until I could grip the blanket. Then I pulled it quickly over my body, covering myself as much as I could, as if that thin piece of fabric could protect me from whatever was standing there. Under the blanket, I started to pray. All the prayers I had learned as a child came rushing back to my lips, whispered in a shaking voice. I prayed and prayed, begging for protection, asking for whatever was there to leave me alone. Eventually, after what felt like a long, exhausting battle with my own fear, I fell asleep, still under the blanket, still clutching the Walkman. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that maybe I had imagined it because I was tired, because I had insomnia, because it was dark, because I had been playing with light and shadows. My mother used to tell me that sometimes my imagination was too active, that I was scaring myself with the things I wanted to see. But deep inside, I always knew that what I saw did not feel like something my mind made up from boredom. It felt like something separate from me, something that invaded my room and used that quiet, late hour to show itself. Years went by. I grew older. Life took on new routines, new worries, new joys. But the memory of that faceless woman stayed inside my head, like a book I could open any time I wanted, even if I did not want to. Then, one day, another piece was added to the puzzle in a way that made everything even more disturbing. My cousin joined the choir in our church within the village. It was a small church, with simple walls and familiar faces, a place where people sang and prayed and tried to feel close to God. She spent a lot of time with her co-choir members and made friends with them. One day, we were talking and sharing stories, the way cousins do when they are comfortable and relaxed. The conversation moved from normal topics to small secrets, and then to the supernatural, as it often does when people are half joking, half serious. That was when she mentioned that 2 of her choir mates were gifted, meaning they had a stronger sensitivity to the spirit world. She called them Kuya Jeff and Kuya Miggy, not their real names, but enough for me to picture them as older brothers in the church group. My cousin told me that during one of their practices, they had held some sessions in our house, probably because it was available and convenient. At some point, Kuya Miggy, one of the gifted ones, told her something that made her skin crawl. He said that she was not alone in our house, that there was someone else there with us. Naturally, my cousin freaked out a bit and asked him who he meant. Was he talking about a living person or something else? He then described one of the presences he could see, a faceless woman with shoulder-length hair, wearing a white dress, who liked to stay around the kitchen area. When my cousin told me that, I felt something inside me drop. My heart seemed to skip a beat. I could almost hear the sound of a key turning in a lock that had been stuck for years. Because that description was exactly like the one I had seen in the reflection of my Walkman button. The woman who had stood at the edge of my bed. The woman I had tried to convince myself I had only imagined. The faceless woman in white with shoulder-length hair. That was not all. My cousin said that when she told this to another gifted choir member, Kuya Jeff, he confirmed it. He said he always saw the same woman whenever they held their practices in our house. She was always there, somewhere in the background, hanging around the kitchen area, watching. At that moment, all the years of doubt and self-questioning collapsed. It was no longer just my word against my imagination. I was not the only one who had seen her. People who did not know my story, who had never heard about that night when I played with my flashlight and saw someone standing at the edge of my bed, had described the same woman. They saw her, too, in the same house. They placed her in the same world as me. The girl was real, or at least as real as any spirit or presence could be. She was not just a fragment of my imagination, not just a shadow created by boredom and late nights. Hearing that confirmation changed the way I felt about my own experiences. It made me feel both validated and more afraid. Validated, because I was not crazy. Afraid because it meant that whatever it was, it truly existed and had chosen our house as one of its places to stay. From that moment on, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched, especially in certain areas of the house. The bathroom, which I used to treat like a stage for my flashlight games, became a place where I moved more quickly, no longer lingering in the dark. The kitchen, where she was said to linger, began to feel heavier and quieter when I was alone in it, as if someone else was standing just outside my field of vision, watching me move, wash dishes, or get a glass of water. Even when I tried to live normally, those small, quiet moments brought back the image of a faceless woman in white, with shoulder-length hair, standing still, always watching. I was 11 years old when this happened, and even though I am 27 now, and so many years have passed, the memory of that day in our old family compound in Mandaluyong City is still as clear to me as if it happened just yesterday, playing again and again in my mind like a scene from a movie that refuses to fade. Our family owns a large compound there, and when I was younger I did not fully understand how unusual the place really was. To me it was simply home. But behind its concrete walls and aging paint was a history that adults whispered about when they thought children were not listening. The compound used to be a hospital during the Japanese occupation, a place where soldiers, prisoners, and civilians were brought in for treatment, or for things people did not always want to talk about. After the war, when the Japanese regime ended, the property was eventually sold, and it was my great-grandfather who bought it. Instead of tearing everything down and building something new, he kept most of the old structure. Time did its work, and slowly the hospital changed its purpose, but the bones of the building remained the same. the long wards where patients once lay side by side and beds were divided into smaller spaces and turned into rooms that we rented out, like apartments. The high ceilings, the narrow hallways, the old tiles, and the layout all hinted at what the building had once been. Only later would I realize how much of that past seemed to linger there, stuck in corners and shadows, refusing to move on. The building had 3 main floors and a strange underground space that was not quite like a normal basement. It was more like a huge, low-ceilinged area beneath everything, dim and damp, that my family once used as a piggery. Even when I was a kid, the piggery was no longer in use, but the memory of its smell still seemed to hang in the air there, mixed with the earthy scent of old concrete and water from the well that stood nearby. The well itself was like something out of an old story, round and dark and deep, with moss and dampness around its edges, as if it was quietly watching everyone who passed. In front of the old piggery area were 5 small rooms, lined up side by side like little boxes, each with a door that looked like it could hide 100 secrets. I always felt uneasy around that part of the compound, even if I could not explain why. The first floor of the building had a small hallway when you entered, nothing fancy, just plain old walls and a floor that had seen thousands of footsteps over the decades. In the middle of that hallway was a concrete desk or counter, heavy and unmoving, like it had been there from the time the building was born. To its left was the entrance that led down to the basement, the old piggery area and the well, through a dark stairway that always smelled slightly muddy and metallic, like wet iron and earth. On the right side of the hallway, there were about 4 rooms, their doors closed most of the time, each one once part of some hospital function, maybe an office or a ward, now turned into living spaces for the tenants. Behind the concrete desk was the staircase leading up to the 2nd floor. That 2nd floor was one of the parts of the building that left a strong impression on anyone who walked through it. It had a long hallway that stretched out ahead of you, making it feel like it went on forever. There were 4 rooms on one side and 4 on the other, their doors facing each other across the narrow path. The walls were old, and the hallway always seemed a bit darker than the rest of the house, even on bright sunny days. At the far end of that hallway was a large window. During the daytime, sunlight would stream in, casting long rectangles of light on the floor and making the dust motes dance lazily in the air. At night, though, that window turned into an empty, black rectangle, like a painting of nothingness, and it made the whole length of the hallway feel more ominous, as if someone, or something, could be standing at the other end, watching. On the right side near the end of the hallway was an old bathroom, the one that later became very important to my story. Opposite to it on the left was the staircase that led up to the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor was where my immediate family lived. It felt more like our home compared to the lower floors. There were only 2 rooms there, one for us, and the other for my uncle. The atmosphere felt slightly lighter up there, maybe because that was where we shared meals, slept, and spent most of our time together. In the middle of the 3rd floor was our dining table, simple but familiar, placed in the open area between the rooms. At the end of the short hallway behind it was another bathroom, the one we normally used. Even with all the normal daily life that happened there, eating meals, watching TV, doing homework, talking, laughing, nobody in the family could completely ignore the fact that the building had once been a hospital, and an old one at that. Stories floated around like invisible cobwebs. Since childhood, I had heard about ghost stories connected to the place. Some of our relatives and even a few of the tenants would talk about strange sounds at night, sudden footsteps in the hallway when nobody was there, doors that seemed to open or close on their own, or feelings of being watched while walking through certain parts of the building. Sometimes they talked about shadows in the corners of their eyes, white figures at the end of the hallway, or someone tapping on the wall at odd hours. Adults would sometimes try to laugh these stories off, but there was always something in their faces that made me think they believed at least some of them. Even as a kid, I learned that the 2nd floor bathroom was rarely used. People preferred going up or down rather than using that particular one. I did not really understand why then. People just said it felt different, or not comfortable, in there. I heard comments like, "Nakakatakat done," or "I wag dyan, sa tas na lang," and even if no one explained it clearly, the message was enough. that bathroom was not their first choice. For the most part of my childhood, though, nothing directly supernatural ever happened to me. The stories were just background noise, the kind of scary things you talk about for fun at night but then forget when the sun rises. That changed when I was 11. One particular day stands out. It was an ordinary day at first, one of those slow afternoons when the light outside is fading and the house feels quiet. I was on the third floor, comfortably sitting and watching TV. I still remember that I was watching Dragon Ball, fully absorbed in the show, following the characters and their fights and transformations with the kind of focus only a child can give. The familiar sound of the TV filled the room, and for a while I forgot about anything else. My attention was completely on the screen, my body relaxed and my mind detached from the actual world around me. After some time, though, my body suddenly reminded me that I was still human. I felt a sudden, strong urge in my stomach, and I realized that I had diarrhea coming. The kind that doesn't give you a lot of time to think or walk slowly. I felt that warm, twisting feeling in my belly and knew I had to get to a bathroom immediately. My first thought was of course to use the third floor bathroom at the end of the hallway, the one I was most familiar with and comfortable in. I rushed toward it, already imagining the relief I would feel once I was inside. But just as I reached the door, I realized it was locked. My father was inside using it. I could hear the faint sound of running water and movement. I tried to knock, hoping he would finish quickly, but when I heard his voice answer that he was still in there, I knew I could not wait. The pressure in my stomach was building, and it would have been too embarrassing to have an accident at that age, especially so close to the bathroom. So I had only one choice. I had to go down to the second floor and use the old, rarely used bathroom at the end of that long hallway. I did not want to. Even then, I knew people did not like going there, but my body gave me no time to hesitate. With hurried steps, I turned away from the third floor bathroom and headed toward the staircase. As I went down, I could feel the air change slightly, becoming a little cooler and heavier, as if the third floor, where we lived, carried more of our warmth and laughter, and the second floor existed in a space where the past felt closer. When I stepped onto the second floor, the long hallway stretched ahead of me, the window at the end giving off a faint light. The rooms on both sides were quiet, their doors closed. I could hear the faint echoes of my own footsteps against the floor as I walked toward the bathroom on the right side, near the end of the hall. The urgency in my stomach pushed me forward, but at the same time there was a prickling feeling at the back of my neck, like someone might be watching me from one of the closed doors or from the shadowy corners. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just thinking too much because of all the ghost stories I'd heard over the years. I reached the bathroom and opened the door. Inside, it was a mid-sized restroom, not tiny but not big either. The walls looked old, the tiles worn and a bit stained from time. The biggest thing in the room, aside from the toilet itself, was a large steel drum full of water. It stood there like a silent guard, round and metallic, its surface reflecting the faint light in a dull, dark way. The drum was the source of water we used there because that bathroom did not have a proper shower. Instead we used a tabo, a plastic dipper, to scoop water from the drum for bathing or flushing. I went in, closed the door behind me, and immediately took care of what had driven me there in the first place. The relief of sitting down and letting my body calm itself made me temporarily forget about any bad feeling I had in the hallway. For a short moment, I was just a kid in a bathroom, focusing on my stomach and nothing else. Then I heard it. A soft sound came from the direction of the steel drum. It was like a bubble popping in the water. Blop! It wasn't loud, but in the quiet of that rarely used bathroom, it sounded distinct. It caught my attention. I turned my head slightly toward the drum, but from where I sat, I couldn't see inside it. I frowned for a second, thinking maybe it was just the water settling, some trapped air escaping or something like that. Houses make weird sounds sometimes, water drums especially, and I didn't want to jump to any scary conclusions. So I told myself it was nothing, just a normal occurrence, and tried to ignore it. When I was finally done, I stood up, cleaned myself, and reached for the tabo. I scooped water from the drum to flush down the toilet, and to make sure everything was clean. The cold water splashed softly, and I tried to focus on that, and not on any stray sounds. When I was finished, I pulled my clothes back on, turning slightly so that my back was facing the drum as I adjusted my shorts. At that exact moment, I heard it again, except this time it was louder, deeper, like a bigger bubble had risen from the bottom and exploded at the surface. Bloop! The sound echoed in the small bathroom, and this time it sent a chill racing up my spine. Goosebumps erupted all over my arms and neck. I froze where I stood. The hair on my arms and at the back of my neck stood up, and my chest suddenly felt tight. Every part of my body started screaming that something was wrong, that I should not be there, that I should run out of that bathroom and never look back. But at the same time, something else inside me was pushing in the opposite direction. It was a strange urge, curiosity mixed with fear, like the need to look at something even though you know it might scare you more. It felt as if, despite my terror, I had to see what had caused that sound. My mind kept trying to reason with me. Maybe it's just water bubbles. Maybe something fell in. Maybe it's nothing. But my heart was pounding hard and fast, as if it already knew that the explanation would not be simple. Even though I was shaking inside, I turned around slowly, step by step, until I was facing the steel drum. The top of the drum was open, and as I approached it, the air felt different, heavy and cold. I walked closer and then leaned in just enough to see the surface of the water inside. What I saw is a picture that has never left me, no matter how many years have gone by. It is still clear in my mind after 18 years, sharp and detailed, like a photograph burned into my memory. Inside the drum, where there should have been nothing but water, there was a woman. A nearly naked lady was in there, submerged, yet somehow visible to me as if the water was both holding her and revealing her at the same time. Her skin looked pale and wet, her hair clinging around her face and shoulders. She looked like she was trapped inside the water itself. It was not like someone simply swimming in a pool. It was as if the water had become a solid barrier, like thick glass or some kind of invisible lid that would not let her rise. She was struggling, trying with all her strength to push herself upward, but every time she tried, it looked like the water was pushing her back, refusing to let her escape. Her hands were hitting the surface from the inside, again and again, as if the water was something she needed to break through. She kept pounding at it like it was a cover she was locked under, her palms slapping against the invisible barrier that kept her prisoner. The expression on her face was desperate, like someone who was drowning but couldn't understand why the liquid around her had turned into something solid and unbreakable. For a few seconds, I was completely paralyzed. Terror held me in place so strongly that I could not even scream, move, or breathe properly. My mind was trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but there was no logic that could explain it. I was just a boy staring down into a water drum, and seeing a trapped woman inside it, in a bathroom that people already avoided. The room felt like it had shrunk around me, the air thick and hard to swallow. The silence between each hit of her hands felt louder than any noise. Then she screamed. The sound that came out did not sound muffled by water at all. It was sharp and clear and horrifyingly loud, as if she were standing right next to me instead of being inside the drum. The scream echoed in my ears and in the room, tearing through the silence and ripping apart any last bit of doubt in my mind about whether this was real. It was not the distant, distorted cry of someone underwater. It was a full-bodied, raw scream of a woman who was terrified, in pain, or furious, or all three. That scream shattered my paralysis. My body finally obeyed my instinct to flee. I jerked backward, almost stumbling, my heart racing as if it wanted to burst out of my chest. Without even thinking, I turned and ran toward the door, my hands fumbling for the lock or handle, anything to get out. I flung the bathroom door open and sprinted down the hallway, my feet pounding against the floor, my breath coming out in sharp bursts. The long hallway that felt empty and ominous when I came in now felt like a tunnel I had to survive. Every part of me expected something, or someone, to grab me from behind, but I did not dare look back. I raced up the stairs to the third floor as fast as my legs could carry me, tears already burning in my eyes. When I reached our floor, I burst into the room, crying and shaking, and went straight to my father. I poured out everything to him between sobs: how I had gone down to the second-floor bathroom, how I heard the bubbles in the water, how I had seen the woman trapped inside the drum, hitting the surface like it was a lid, and how she had screamed like she was right beside me. My words tumbled over each other as I tried to make him understand what I had just seen and felt. My father listened, but he was a skeptic by nature. He had always been the type to look for logical explanations, to dismiss stories of ghosts and spirits as imagination, nerves, or exaggerated tales meant to scare children. After I finished talking, he tried to calm me down, patting my shoulder and telling me that it was probably just my imagination. Maybe I was tired, maybe I had scared myself with thoughts of ghost stories people always told about the building. Maybe the sound I heard was just water and my mind had turned it into something else. That was what he believed, or at least what he chose to say. But no matter how much he tried to explain it away, no matter how many times he said it was just in my head, I knew in my deepest self that what I had seen in that drum was not something my mind had invented out of nowhere. The image of that pale, nearly naked woman trapped in the water, the way she hit the surface with desperate hands, and the way her scream rang out as if she stood right beside me, those are things that no simple imagination, especially from a child who just wanted to use the bathroom and go back to watching Dragon Ball, could create so vividly and so violently. My father's words did not erase what I had seen. The second-floor bathroom, which had already been rarely used, became a place I could not even walk past without feeling my skin crawl. Even now, many years later, when I think of that compound and that old Japanese-era hospital the way it stood when I was a child, the first image that comes to my mind is not the long hallways or the cracked walls or the old well near the piggery, but that steel drum of water and the woman I saw inside it, trapped and screaming, as if the past of that hospital had risen up through the water to make sure I never forgot. I have been living in an apartment in Pasig City for a while now, and over time it has come to feel like a second home to me, but it is also the place where I slowly realize that we are not exactly alone. I share the apartment with my 2 cousins, one male and one female, and sometimes my parents come over to visit whenever they want. The apartment is not isolated, it is part of a compound with other units and neighbors, which at first made me feel safe. There are a total of 6 other units aside from mine. 5 of those are occupied by other families or tenants, and 1 unit stands vacant directly in front of ours. At first, all of this just felt ordinary and normal, the kind of place where people rent, work, study, and go on with their lives. But as months passed and strange stories and experiences piled up, the compound stopped feeling like just a simple group of apartments. It started to feel like a place with another layer, something you only notice when you are quiet late at night, or when you feel a pair of eyes watching you even though there is no one visibly there. Early this year, my male cousin decided to spend his vacation with us in Pasig. He normally lives in the province, but he is already very used to Manila because he has been coming back and forth for years. It was nothing new for him to stay in the city, sleep in apartments, and adjust to different places. He is not the type to be easily scared or shocked by city life. At that time, my life followed a very specific routine because I work in the BPO industry. Our clients are from the US, so my schedule is almost always at night. I leave the house when most people are getting ready for bed, and I come home when the sky is already lightening for the morning. That means that during the time I am out working, whoever is left at home has the apartment mostly to themselves. That night, when my cousin had just arrived for his vacation, I left the house as usual to go to work. He stayed behind, waiting for my female cousin to arrive from school. Since we only have 1 bedroom inside the apartment, we had arranged our sleeping spaces in a way that worked for all of us. In the bedroom, there is a double-deck bed. I usually sleep there. But in the living room, we also have a mattress that we lay out on the floor at night. My cousins like sleeping in the living room a lot. They say it is more comfortable there because there is more open space, and the air feels cooler and less cramped compared to the bedroom. Sometimes they even joke that the living room feels like a mini dormitory or a simple lounge where you can watch TV until you fall asleep right beside it. When I got home from work the next morning, my cousin told me something that made me stop and really look at him. He said that the night before, he thought I had not gone to work at all. He honestly believed I was still in the apartment. I asked him why, and he explained that sometime during the night, before my female cousin arrived home from school, he had looked toward my room and saw a man sleeping on my bed. From where he stood, this man was lying on the bed with his back facing the room and his front facing the wall. At first glance, my cousin assumed it was me. After all, it was my bed, and the figure on it was in the place where I usually sleep. But as he kept looking, he noticed something strange. The person on the bed had long hair. My cousin knows very well that I do not have long hair. The body shape was similar enough to fool him at first, but that detail about the hair stood out strongly in his memory. He realized that whoever it was not me. Before he could really react or call out, the figure disappeared. It did not stand up, walk out, or move past him. It was just there 1 second, lying on my bed with long hair covering the back and the head turned toward the wall, and then in the next instant it was simply gone, as if it had never been there at all. He also mentioned that on that same night, he had seen a lady outside our screen door looking into the house. It did not happen just once. He saw her on 2 separate occasions. He would glance toward the door and see a woman standing there, looking in through the screen. Then when he would look again or try to focus more, she would no longer be there. The first time he saw her, he tried to brush it off and just ignore it. Maybe he thought he was only tired from traveling, or that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But when it happened again later that night, he realized that there was something very odd about our apartment. That was when he started to consider that there might be unseen entities inside and around our unit, not just random shadows or simple imagination. Curious and a bit shaken, he later decided to ask our neighbors about what he had seen. He wanted to know if anyone else had experienced similar things or if there was some history about the place that could explain the apparitions. Our neighbors did not seem completely surprised by his story. One of them told him that there used to be an old man who was found dead under the elevated part of our house. The structure of our unit is such that it is raised a bit from the ground, creating a hollow space under the bedroom floor where a person could actually crawl or stay if they wanted to. It is not completely closed off, and people in the past could apparently go under there, maybe to rest or hide or avoid the rain. According to the neighbor, this old man had gone home late one night and was not allowed to enter the house by his family. Maybe they were angry at him for coming home late, or maybe they had issues that we will never fully know. Feeling rejected and tired, he decided to just stay under the bedroom in that elevated space, probably thinking he would just rest there for a while. That very spot, the one our neighbors pointed out, was where his body was later found. He had died from a heart attack. It was a sad story already by itself, but knowing that his death happened so close to where we sleep every night added a different layer of uneasiness to the apartment. The neighbors also told my cousin a bit about the history of the area where our compound was built. They said that long before there were apartments and tenants and people like us renting units, the place used to be full of trees and tall grasses. It was a more natural, almost wild-looking space, not yet turned into a business site. Old trees stood where now we have walls and roofs, and the land had its own quiet life. But like many places in the city, the owner of the lot eventually decided to make money out of it, which is how the compound came to be. They cut down the trees, cleared the grasses, and built multiple apartments, the kind of bungalow-style single-floor units that are common in many parts of the Philippines. Hearing that, I could not help but think about how often people say that spirits or elementals sometimes dislike being disturbed when their trees and natural homes are destroyed. Whether you fully believe it or not, the thought creeps into your mind when strange things start happening around you. As we were all talking about this, my female cousin suddenly shared some of her own experiences in the apartment. She had not told us everything before. Maybe because she did not want to scare us, or maybe she thought no one would believe her. But once we opened the topic, her stories began to come out one by one. She told us about one particular time when she arrived home late from school. It was already dark, and the compound was quieter than usual, with most people already inside their units. As she approached our apartment, she saw an old man sitting on the couch just outside our front door. We do have a small couch placed there, like a bench where you can sit for a while, talk to neighbors, or take a break before entering the house. The old man was right there, sitting on it as if he belonged there. He was coughing, the kind of cough that sounds real and physical, not like something distant or imagined. It was not just my cousin who saw him. One of our neighbors happened to be nearby at the same time, and she also noticed him. The neighbor even turned to my cousin and asked her, "Did you see that?" My cousin answered, "Yes, I can see him too." The neighbor then asked her if she knew him, if he was some relative or someone allowed to be there. My cousin replied that she did not know him at all. For a few moments, they both stared at the old man sitting on the couch. Then, all of a sudden, he was gone. There was no moment of him standing up, no walking away, no sound of footsteps. He simply vanished from the spot where he had been sitting, leaving behind only an empty couch and two women who knew he had definitely been there just seconds before. According to the neighbor, that was not the first time she had seen something strange either, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. My female cousin had other experiences too. There were times when she would be in the house alone, watching TV, just relaxing and enjoying her show. Then, without warning, the TV would suddenly turn off by itself. There was no one else around with her at those times. The remote control would be on the table, untouched. There was no timer set for the TV to automatically power off. It would simply shut down in the middle of whatever she was watching, leaving her staring at her own reflection on the dark screen. At first, she would check the remote, the plug, the outlet, anything that might explain it. But everything would be in place. The electricity in the rest of the house would be fine. It was just the TV that decided to go quiet, as if someone invisible had pressed the power button out of boredom or annoyance. The lot owner of the compound, the person who originally built the apartments and turned the land into a business, had already passed away. The one running things now is her daughter, but she does not live inside the compound with the rest of us. She lives somewhere nearby in the same area of Passy but only comes over to check on things, collect rent, and handle business matters. In a way, that makes the compound feel even more detached, like the people in charge are physically and emotionally removed from the daily life and nightly atmosphere of the place. We who live inside experience everything firsthand, while they only see it from the outside. 2 weeks ago, I had another encounter that added to the list of strange events. My best friend and I had decided to have a small drinking session at my place. It was nothing wild, just a casual plan to chat, relax, and drink some beer. In the Filipino way, we also prepared pilutan, which is the term we use for food or snacks that you eat while drinking. It can be anything: fried meat, chips, dried fish, sisig, or simple finger food. My best friend came over, and before we even opened the beers, he went to the kitchen to prepare something for us to eat while we drank. At that time, my female cousin and I were inside the bedroom, and my best friend was the only one moving around in the living room and kitchen area. He is the type of person who can see ghosts, something I already knew about him. He does not brag about it, but he has shared some of his experiences with me in the past. While he was busy getting the pilutan ready, he happened to glance toward the living room. That was when he saw something odd. In the living room, he saw a man positioned in a crouching or ducking stance, as if hiding or huddling near the floor. The man was facing away from him, showing only his back. My friend said it looked like the figure was laughing quietly because he could see the shoulders moving up and down, like the motion of someone trying to stifle laughter or shaking from amusement. My friend did not see its face, only the back and the movements. He knew that it was not any of us because he could clearly hear my voice and my female cousin's voice coming from inside the room. We were talking and had not come out yet. It was just the two of us in the bedroom and my best friend in the living room and kitchen. No one else was supposed to be there. Instead of being completely terrified, my best friend remained surprisingly calm and told me afterward that his first thought was simply that maybe this man, whoever or whatever he was, wanted to join our drinking session. When he told me this, I tried to make light of it by joking the same way, that maybe the spirit just wanted some company and a drink. But deep inside, I knew that there was something truly strange about having an unknown man crouching and laughing in the middle of our living room, visible only to someone who has the ability to see entities most of us cannot. Then, just last week, on a Sunday, another incident happened that involved me directly. My male cousin and I decided to sleep in the living room that night. It was not unusual. Sometimes we liked changing our sleeping arrangements for comfort. I laid a mattress on the floor and slept there, while my cousin lay down on the couch. Since we were both tired, my cousin fell asleep ahead of me. I, on the other hand, was still awake, lying on the mattress, trying to let my mind slow down so I could fall asleep too. The living room was quiet, and the only sounds were the faint noises from outside the compound and the soft breathing of my cousin on the couch. While I was in that half-awake, half-drowsy state, I suddenly felt something touch my waist. It was not just a light brush. It was a clear sensation, like a hand or fingers resting briefly on that part of my body. My immediate reaction was to assume that my cousin was messing with me. He has a playful personality, and likes to tease and make fun of me sometimes, especially if I am scared or too serious. So I quickly turned around to check if he had gotten off the couch and decided to poke or tickle me just to disturb my sleep. But when I looked toward the couch, he was still lying there, in the same position as before, clearly asleep. His breathing was steady, his eyes were closed, and there was no sign that he had moved at all. The couch cushion still held the shape of his body, undisturbed. In that moment, a cold realization went through me. If it was not my cousin who touched my waist, then it must have been something else. I tried to calm myself down and forced my eyes to close again, telling myself I would ask him in the morning just to be entirely sure. When morning came and we both woke up, I did not waste time. I asked him directly, "Was it you who touched my waist last night? Because sometimes you do that just to mess with me." He shook his head and answered firmly, "No." According to him, he had been sleeping the whole time and had not gotten down from the couch at all once he closed his eyes. His answer confirmed what I had already suspected deep down, that the touch did not come from any living person inside the apartment. Before we fell asleep that night, we had been watching TV together. While we were sitting there, my cousin had mentioned something else that made the incident even more connected to everything else that had been happening. He told me that he had seen a man pass by in the room and then move to stand behind him. He did not react strongly at the time, maybe because he did not want to scare me or because he has already seen so many things in his life that one more ghostly figure did not shock him as much anymore. But he told me about it, and that was the moment I understood that the presence in our apartment was very active, not just something that appeared once and then disappeared forever. At that point I accepted that the thing that touched my waist was not just my imagination or a random twitch of my muscles. It really was one of the entities in the house. This cousin of mine, like my best friend, also has the ability to see ghosts. He works as a nurse in one of the government hospitals in the Philippines, and in that job he has been exposed to many cases of death, sickness, and emotions. Hospitals themselves are known places where spirits can linger, and he has shared that he has seen his share of strange things there as well. The only time I really heard fear in his voice was when he told me about something he saw in the hospital where he works. He said that once he saw someone, a figure that first looked like a human, suddenly turn into a large dog right in front of him and stare directly at him with intense eyes. That was one of the experiences that truly shook him. Even though he has this gift, he does not like to use it or entertain it. He tries to ignore it as much as possible. He believes that if he opens himself up too much and shows interest in these spirits or entities, more and more of them will come to him, asking for help, attention, or some kind of favor, and they will not stop until they get what they need. He does not want to be overwhelmed by them, so he chooses to pretend not to see when he can, to avoid any direct interaction. All these different experiences, the man on my bed with long hair, the lady looking through the screen door, the old man coughing on the couch outside with the neighbor seeing him too, the TV turning off by itself, the crouching man laughing in the living room, the invisible hand touching my waist, and the figures that only my cousin and my best friend can fully see, have slowly built a picture in my mind of what life in our apartment is really like. It is not just a simple space made of walls, floors, and ceilings. It is a place where the living and the unseen share the same air, where the history of the land and the people who once lived here or died here mingle with our everyday routines. We still try to live normally as much as we can. We go to work, to school, we eat, we watch TV, we laugh, we have visitors, and we sleep. But there are always moments now when the hair on the back of my neck rises for no clear reason, when the quiet of the night feels too thick, when a shadow seems too solid for a second, or when a sudden touch makes me question who or what is beside me. In those moments, I remember all the stories my cousins, my neighbors, and my friend have told me, and I understand that our apartment is not just ours. We share it with others, ones we cannot always see, but who sometimes let us know very clearly that they are there.